Okay, hello, welcome back to my channel. My makeup has been on since 6 a.m. this morning and it is now 5:30 p.m. So if I'm looking a little worse for wear, that is why. But I think it still looks fine. If you're wondering, I did this in a reel on Instagram and TikTok because I've started posting on TikTok, not consistently at all, but it's Laura Clark Makeup. Again, like my Instagram, if you want to follow it. Good times. Anyway, so today I thought I had a brainwave and I thought I would go with it. I want to do a video talking about basically my favorite eyeshadow formulas and ranking them and just talking about kind of like the pros and cons, I guess, about why I like them, but also I like them for different reasons. They're different, and for the reasons that I like them, some people may not like them and vice versa. So I don't know, I thought it would be good to have it all in one place, all my favorite, as of right now, eyeshadow formulas, and also I'm just going to talk about the palettes that I have in that formula. So I have one kind of honorable mention. I guess I would rank it last, but I just feel like I really like it, but I don't feel as confident in the formula. I don't know. There's something about it where I don't want to I think I just haven't used all of the palettes that I have from them enough to fully say this is my favorite, but I do really love Beige Cosmetics, particularly their mattes. I think their mattes are beautiful and their shimmers are also really nice. It's really dependent, I'd say, on what palette you have for shimmers, but I do have a lot. I have actually an entire swatching video. I'll link it down below, BH. But basically, before we all knew that they were going bankrupt or whatever, filing for bankruptcy, when they were having really intense sales, I bought basically all their palettes that they offered that didn't have pressed glitter. So we'll just go through them. I have the Fuck Off palette, just so eloquent. I just don't feel like I've used all of these palettes enough to really go in depth on their inconsistencies, if there are any, or anything like that. But I do really like their formula. This is the Do Not Disturb palette that I also have, the Optimistic AF palette. So pretty. Their Let That Shit Go palette. The Low Key Love You palette. Oops. The Looking Like a Snack palette. And then we have their Travel Series palette. So no, do not fall. Oh my god, I have palettes on palettes behind me. I have the Party in Puerto Rico palette, which is such a beautiful warm-toned color story. The Beautiful in Barcelona. I really love this color story so much, honestly. The Smitten in Switzerland, which is another just a gorgeous muted color story. The Summer in Saint Tropez. The shimmers in here are so pretty. The Amor in Amalfi. I have great memories of this palette. I took it with me and used it when we went to Amalfi, and I really just was living my full dream. The Lost in Los Angeles palette, which is pastels, but the shimmers in here are really pretty. Hangin' in Hawaii, which is a nice little neutral pinky palette. Trendy in Tokyo, which is a rainbow palette, and for example, I feel like the shimmers in here are not as good as the shimmers in the other palettes. Passion in Paris, this is one of just my absolute favorite palettes. This is beautiful. Mattes, delicious. Shimmers, delicious. The Mimosa palette. Again, shimmers are beautiful. Avocado Toast, so nice. I love it. And then probably my favorite, Blueberry Muffin. So pretty. I feel like the brunch palettes are the best ones in my humble opinion, and yeah, I just find the mattes to be super buildable. I think depending on the palette, the shimmers are really sparkly and nice. They're blendable. It's just like a very easy, foolproof eyeshadow formula I find to use that does kind of all the things you want it to do, which is why I want to give it an honorable mention. It doesn't necessarily stand out to me as being like in my official like favorite eyeshadow formula categories, but if I had to include one more, it would definitely be in there, just because mattes, like I was saying, kind of do everything you want an eyeshadow formula to do. They're pigmented, but not so pigmented that they're hard to blend. They build really beautifully. They're easy to blend. And then the shimmers, again, even if they're not so crazy sparkly, they're smooth, they're opaque, they're just really nice metallics. So now, my official favorite eyeshadow formulas. I have 6 of them here. I'm gonna go from like lowest to highest ranking. For my number 6 favorite eyeshadow formula, I'm gonna go with Beauty Bay. Beauty Bay is just such a, not long time left, but I just have loved every single palette that I've tried from them. In terms of pros for them, I find their mattes to be pigmented but still really blendable. I feel like they really have a nice kind of mix of the two, where they have pigmented mattes rather than like a super buildable formula, but their mattes are still such a dream to blend out. I love that they always, or not always, but most of the time include deeper mattes in most of their palettes, particularly most of their like larger palettes that I have from them, and that is something that is really important to me, for me personally, and I also just like to see that because if you have a light to mid-tone palette, that really limits the number of people who are going to be able to use your palette in terms of skin tone. I find that they have really unique color stories, which also adds to it. You know, it's not just like you have an amazing formula, but you're coming out with like the same neutral palettes, for example. Not that neutral palettes are bad, but I feel like there's a balance between having a really nice formula and then having unique color stories. And you can have a unique neutral color story as well, but that also is something that keeps me going back to their palettes and makes their brand kind of one of my favorites. Their shimmers as well, delicious. Okay, even their regular metallics is still a really nice kind of just standard metallic formula, but their special shimmers, when they do it right, they do it so right, and they're so sparkly, so dimensional and beautiful, and they're affordable, which is another huge pro. In terms of cons, I don't have a ton of cons. The only thing that I find is that because they're a little bit, I don't know, they're a little bit of a thicker formula. So if you layer mattes on mattes on mattes, like I prefer to do, they can get patchy if you're not careful. If you're going in with like too many layers or too thick of a layer, I guess. Not every formula does this, but I do find certain times, not every time, but certain times, if I'm not paying attention or just layering too much, it can kind of just get patchy and pick up on themselves. So let's just go over some of the Beauty Bay palettes that I have. So this is the Utopia palette. Obviously this is an outlier, doesn't have a lot of depth, but I really do like the shades in there. And then we have some of the 16 pan palettes. This is the Earthy palette. I still haven't done 3 Looks 1 palettes with these. I'm so sorry. But they are coming. The Midnight palette, a beautiful purple blue color story. And then the Berries palette. It still haunts me that I don't have the new Romance or whatever, but oh, so pretty. Then we have the infamous, or famous, I guess, Wilderness palette. The shimmers in here are beyond out of this world. So nice. Age of Opulence, which I feel like I'm also guilty of not mentioning it enough anymore, but I feel like this is on the same level to me as Wilderness. Then we have Love Notes, which this is also not my favorite color story from them, but at least they really hit it out of the park with the shimmers. Such a pretty, this palette, this is the Sunset Horizons. Absolutely gorgeous, and this is what I'm talking about with the deeper mattes. So, so nice. Book of Magic, again, a cult favorite. Also loving the deeper mattes in here. And then we have the Jade palette, which honestly has grown on me the more that I've had it, even though this shade 2222 keeps crumbling. And it makes me so sad. So that is also a con, and I can tell that this black might start to crumble. This makes me very sad to see that this shade is crumbling. I think they're just a bit softer, they're matte, so I guess if you hit it the wrong way with your brush or something, they have a tendency to crumble. Okay, so next up, which you probably won't be surprised if you've watched me for a while, is Kaleidos. I love Kaleidos. I've loved them forever since they only had a few of their Futurism palettes out. I just think they really hit the mark of like holding to a really unique aesthetic that no one else is really doing, executing it really well, and then also having such beautiful makeup and eyeshadow. Like, I feel like lots of brands have the aesthetic or have the vision, maybe don't execute it really well, maybe their formula isn't as great, doesn't meet, you know, their aesthetic vision kind of thing, but I feel like Kaleidos really just hits the mark with everything, and they're always doing new stuff. Like, you never know what they're gonna come up with next. And also, I just love their formula. The pros, again, are very similar to Beauty Bay. They have a pigmented formula, which I find actually a little bit more buildable compared to like Beauty Bay, for example, which I really like. I love a buildable formula. That's how I prefer to work with my shadows, is building up in layers. Certain palettes I feel like have more pigment than others, like the Club Nebula, for example, I feel like is pigmented right at the gate, whereas if you use like Electro Turquoise, this palette is like a little bit more buildable with the mattes kind of deal. But overall, I feel like they build, they blend, they are pigmented but not difficult to work with, and their shimmers are beautiful and sparkly and so special, which is honestly why I have put them above Beauty Bay, because I feel like I pretty much like Beauty Bay and Kaleidos' mattes an equal amount, but the Kaleidos shimmers are so sparkly and so dimensional that they really, you know, get bumped up over Beauty Bay's formula in general. The only cons that I really have with Kaleidos' formula is similar to Beauty Bay. If you layer them too much, they can get a little bit patchy. So that is disappointing, especially as someone who does like to work in layers. I do find that that's an issue. And again, it's less of an issue than it is with Beauty Bay. I feel it can happen certain times. I feel like Lunar Lavender as a palette has a lot of issues with that, honestly, in terms of this specific like purpley brown has patchiness issues. And sometimes with Club Nebula, I can find that just because they're a little bit softer and like almost a thicker matte formula. So I just find that sometimes it can lift up on themselves if I'm not working in thin enough layers kind of deal. But otherwise, chef's kiss to Kaleidos' formula. Let's just go over these in no particular order. We have Sashimi City, and I mean, packaging is beautiful. The shimmers in this palette are just divine. I do also wish sometimes that Kaleidos would tend to have deeper shades. A lot of their palettes, I find I do have to reach for other palettes to deepen my looks up, but you know, that's also a personal preference thing. This is Lunar Lavender, like I was saying. Again, shimmers in here are just absolutely beyond. This is an older one. We have Astro Pink. Sincere apologies, my camera cut off. We have Electro Turquoise, which is such a beautiful, again, divine shimmers in here. Cyber Bronze, we know and love. A beautiful neutral palette. Sci-Fi Green, also iconic. Flower Punk, which I love this shade Aloe Cove. I've been wearing this palette this week, and this shade Aloe Cove is just so good. Then we have Escape Pod. Shimmers in here are just, I can't even describe them because they're so pretty. And then we have Club Nebula. Just, I mean, we know her, we love her. Next up, we have Blend Bunny. Blend Bunny has really knocked it out of the park in pretty much every way for me. There are pretty much the pros are just, again, everything. True to their name, they do blend with pretty much no effort. Like, I will say they probably blend the easiest out of any matte formula I've ever used. Again, they're pigmented, but not so pigmented. If anything, they're a more buildable formula, but I personally love that. I actually think if you, I don't know, but I do hear like nothing but good things pretty much from everyone, no matter what way you prefer your makeup, like light to dark or dark to light. So maybe I'm wrong. But honestly, I feel like they really have the perfect harmony of being buildable if you like to do your makeup in layers, and pigmented if you like to pack your shadows on. It's just like you can do any method pretty much, and I feel like they'll work. So it's just such a good matte formula. It's amazing. I also, not everyone loves it, but I love how they set their palettes up. Light, mid-toned, deep. To me, that's perfection. That's exactly what I want in palettes. So that's less about formula, but also another reason why it's just hands down one of my top formulas, because I reach for their palettes all the time. The only cons that I really have are that the shimmers are not my absolute fave. I will say the Primal palette that just came out, these are the best shimmers that I've seen Blend Bunny do for sure. I think they're really quite good. The Surge palette shimmers are not my favorite, so I wouldn't reach for them for shimmers. Whereas Beauty Bay and Kaleidos, I could easily see myself reaching for their shimmers. But I'd only pretty much use Blend Bunny shimmers if I was using them in a palette. You know what I mean? And then the other thing, which could be a con, could be not a con, depending on the person. Sometimes I feel like I love to just know thoughts and blend, okay? I love to blend. I'm not a, graphic liner girly. I'm like a blown out bitch, you know what I mean? Like, that's me, you know that if you're here. So I love to blend, and sometimes if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, I feel like sometimes they can just blend into each other because they are so easy to blend. They don't have as much like grip, I guess, to the eyes. So I do find that I have to kind of like go back in and deepen up certain areas if I want. If I just find that I personally can overblend their mattes a little bit. Whereas other eyeshadow formulas, I don't find do that. But again, if you find that you have issues with shadows sticking down or not being able to blend things out, Blend Bunny, I almost guarantee you will not have any issues with them. In terms of the palettes that I have from them, I don't have that many. I mean, they don't have that many in general, but Primal, which I just talked about, I just uploaded a first impressions of this palette actually. Then I have Dollhouse, which I love. It's so nice. The shimmers in here are also really, really nice, I will say. And then Surge, which is divine to me. This row of mattes is just like, I could never need any more deep mattes, honestly, than these. Delectable. Absolutely delectable. I love my Blend Bunny palettes. I would not give them up for anything. Next up, we have Melt. Melt has my heart and will always have my heart. They're very polarizing brand in terms of shadow. I feel like a lot of the times you either love melt or you despise melt. Like, I honestly rarely have heard much in between, but for me, specifically as someone who loves dark eyeshadow, melt always gives it to me pretty much every single time. That's number one pro for me, is that they pretty much always, I think in every single palette I'm going to show you, they have deep mattes. I reach for my melt palettes at least once a week. At least once a week. When I'm just doing my makeup myself, to reach for any deeper mattes that may be missing from other palettes for me. And they just build like a dream. I never have patchiness with melt mattes. I never have patchiness with melt mattes. You could build like 78 layers using a melt palette and it's just gonna get darker and darker and darker. And for me, that's just absolutely ideal, 100% ideal. Depending, they can be a little bit difficult to blend, but I personally don't really experience that many issues with blending. Honestly, I just know that that's a common complaint, but again, I like to work in layers. That could have something to do with me not really having many issues. And again, not really necessarily a formula thing, but more like something related to melt eyeshadow specifically. Their color stories are always just divine. You know, like they're always doing something that's curated, I feel like, and just always interesting to me, at least. Not everyone agrees, but I just adore melt. For me, the only con is that their shimmer formula is just not, I feel like, up to par with a lot of other brands. I feel like sometimes they have really good shimmers. Like, I really like the shimmers that are in Mary Jane, but like, I don't know, they just don't always have the best shimmer formulas, or at least I like sparkle, I like texture, and they don't always do that. But that's my only complaint from the brand, and that's why they're not higher up in this list. So the melt palettes I have, OG Gemini. This is the older Gemini. I still love and use it all the time. It's like my go-to neutral palette. I have Muerte, Divine Beloved. I had to really stop myself from not buying a backup when they re-released it. Also have Vita, gorgeous. I feel like this does not or did not get enough love. Millennial Pinks. Don't love this as much. This is probably my least favorite melt palette that I have, but I'm really glad to have it. Mary Jane, Divine. I adore it. I adore it so much. Smoke Sessions, oh my god, Sour Diesel and Space Queen. Some of the best matte greens I have in my entire collection. The Waiting Room palette from Melt. I love a red and gray color story, and this is just so good. So good. And I love Beetlejuice, but that's besides the point. And then Amor y Mariposas. I love this as well. I adore this. The shade Chato is just beautiful. It's so, so nice. All right, number 2 for my favorite eyeshadow formula. Can you guess it? It's Colored Raine. Very similar matte formula to Melt, in my opinion. I find that they have a lot of similar qualities, but Colored Raine is edged out over Melt because their shimmers also are gorgeous. Again, I know not everyone loves Colored Raine's formula, but similar to Melt, depth, always. They always have depth in their palettes, and I just adore that about them. And again, you can build and build and build and build and build their mattes. They never get patchy. They just get darker and more beautiful, and I rarely have issues blending them. I do find that their mattes can get a little sticky. I will say sometimes they require a little bit more effort to blend, but for me, I just always appreciate having the depth, and that's something that I'm willing to work a little bit more for. Not That's not going to be universal for everyone though. Also, their shimmers, like I said, so sparkly, so beautiful, like truly so divine. I feel like people do not give Colored Raine enough credit for their shimmer formula. It's so good. It's so good. And the only con that I really have, like I said, is that their deep shades can be a little bit tricky to blend, but for the most part, particularly their newer palettes that I've tried, I feel like it just has gotten even better, and their blendability is just so good. I feel like their older palettes, they can have a little bit, like their mattes can be a little bit tricky to blend, but the newer formula that I've tried from them is no effort to blend their deep mattes. So I have the Colored Raine and Power palette, and this I feel like is so criminally underrated. It's so good, and no one loved it as much as it deserved to be loved, okay? Colored Raine Safari Raine. This did get deservedly amazing reviews, as it deserved. Rose Garden, beautiful. Not my favorite of theirs, but I do love this collection. And Botanical, I like Rose Garden more, but this is still really nice. This is my new favorite neutral palette. Yes, I said it, Rebellious Nudes. Is this not everything that you could ever want in a neutral palette? Is it not? I know it is. And then, again, polarizing Juicy Boost. If you watch me, you know that I adore this palette. It is, to me, so good. These shimmers do not get enough love. I do wish that there was like a deeper brown or a deeper like pink or red, but that's okay. And I just think it's so fun. So Colored Raine, chef's kiss from me. And then my number one favorite eyeshadow formula. Can you guess? It's Pat McGrath. I feel like a bougie motherfucker when I say that, but it just is not, you can't beat it for me. And I cannot believe that I'm saying that. If you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have literally never even looked at buying a Pat McGrath anything. But it's just literally, I have no complaints. The only cons for me for Pat McGrath are that they're expensive. And that's like a large con. I will say, like, it is a large con. It's a large barrier for a lot of people. But if you do end up buying a Pat McGrath palette, you will not regret it, in my opinion, because it's just a divine formula. Although I will say not everyone agrees with me, and that's okay. But this is just my experience, and I will tell you why. Because this is the most buildable eyeshadow formula I have ever used in such a good way, in that you can layer and layer and layer and layer, and you're going to, with each layer, you're going to see the shadow get deeper. It's never going to be patchy, and it's going to blend like an absolute dream. It's just the perfect formula. It's so good, but you still can pack the shadow on and blend it out, and you're still going to have like that pigment. I just think it's perfection. And say it with me, there's sparkle. Obviously that is more specific to the Mothership palettes, but you know, I just love the sparkle from them. Okay, at least if you're paying that much money, you're getting like a divine level of sparkle. Well, actually I do have this one here. So, like, for example, this is the Eye Ecstasy Subversive eyeshadow palette. This just has 5 little shadows in here. I do really like this. I like Pat McGrath's regular shimmer formula, but like, it's nothing compared to like VR Fire Opal. It's nothing compared to Astral Luna Gold. You know, and these are just such special shades to me, truly, that I just feel so immensely happy every time I use my Pat McGrath palette. So this is obviously Brown Seduction. Then we have Utopian Dreams, which I just uploaded a 3 looks 1 palette with this video. A 3 looks 1 palette video with this palette. And then my Boo Celestial Divinity. I adore this. These have like not special shimmers per se, but beautiful shimmers nonetheless. And I just love it. All right, this concludes this video. With that, we conclude this video. I hope that you enjoyed this because I feel like I've never truly actually sat down and narrowed it down and talked about what my legit, like, this is me announcing what are my favorite shadow formulas and why. I really wanted to try my best to explain why I like these, why they're in my top, and any cons perhaps that may make you not like them. I don't want to just be like, this is my favorite and everyone should buy it, because everyone does their makeup in different ways and everyone has different preferences when it comes to eyeshadow. Let me know what your favorite formulas are. I would love to know, particularly if it's a brand that I didn't mention here or if I've never tried before. Not that you necessarily know everything I've tried, but if it's, you know, a brand that you haven't seen me mention before and it's your favorite, let a hoe know, because I'm always on the hunt for new amazing eyeshadow formulas. I know Unearthly is supposed to be really good. I really want to try them. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I upload 3 videos a week. Typically, I always want to give that disclaimer. Sometimes things go wrong, but if you want to hang out with me some more, continue, that's what you can usually expect. And I would love to see you in my next video. Bye!